Votre attention.
If I could have your attention, please.
16e réunion.
Welcome to the 16th meeting of BOI, and we will begin with the minutes of the previous meeting.
In order. Tout le monde va bien avec la procédure, le procès-verbal? Parfait.
Everyone's in agreement with the minutes? Good.
Previous meetings. Madame de Bellefeuille.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the minutes, we received the dashboard for virtual meetings. I'd like to once again thank the team for providing these performance statistics, which we use to improve our services. And I have a question about two graphs. I'd like to reassure my colleague, Mr. McKinnon, that I won't spend an hour on this, but it's an important issue in order to continue improving our services. In the graph 1, I think that it's on page 2, so we can go by page number. On graph 1, Mr. Chair, we see for October 22, 55 people had not done a test, and they did not do a pretest. So my question is, when you look at the percentages, 85% of the tests witnesses had pretests and everything went well. But when you look at the graph, you think, well, maybe we're complaining for nothing. But when you look at the numbers of people that were affected by this, that's another story. Mr. Chair, am I to understand that these people testified even though they didn't have a pretest, and even although they weren't there in present? Did these witnesses go ahead and testify? I think Mr. McDonald could answer that question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I think it's important to look at graph number 1 based on graph number 3 as well. Yes, that's for 55% for people. Yes, they may have done their pretest just before the meeting started. But in the final meeting, there's a second test done to see whether the witness can testify or not. And it's at this point that this 55%, well, the vast majority probably were successful and were able to continue testifying. But in graph number 3, you can see about 17 people, 3.9% of the witnesses, we're still experiencing audio problems. My second question is that, well, we can see that there has been an improvement in the number of people wearing headsets thanks to the efforts that were made. And we were successful in dealing with people who didn't have HOC recommended headsets. But last week, witnesses were able to testify without wearing the proper equipment. And finally, we had to stop the testimony, cancel it, and postpone it to another time. Can you explain that, given all the efforts we've done, how is it that we still have people, witnesses who don't have the equipment, and they're still given the floor before the committee? I think that the committee is going to always make every possible effort to enable a witness to participate. In the circumstances that I mentioned earlier, when a witness wants to appear before a committee, we do the pre-test just before the meeting starts to see if things are working, and it's at that point where we determine whether it's possible for them to continue testifying. So once again, it's important to do this pre-test at the start, but we still, and wearing a headset is is, well, the headset, yes, that does pose a problem for most cases where people have not been able to testify. So we're doing everything we can to ensure that people wear the proper headset. It's important to ensure that participants are able to testify. Mr. Chair, I'd like to know whether the committee chairs and the clerks have a written directive encouraging them not to enable witnesses without a headset from testifying. Is there any type of directive so that people appearing without a headset is the exception? Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do know that more and more now committees are tightening their efforts, but there has been no motion adopted by the House to say that absolutely a witness has to wear a headset approved by the House. But that's an available option, and it's up to the committee or the House to make a decision. We've all received the chair's note saying that the headset is now indispensable, that its use is mandatory. How is this being interpreted by committee chairs and clerks? Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're talking about the letter from the Translation Bureau? No, the note that we received, it's a reminder on the use of House of Commons approved headsets. It's Chair Doré who signed it. We received this letter yesterday. Yes. Everyone is encouraged for every parliamentary activity to wear a House-approved headset to ensure or to minimize the possibility of audio problems. My final question with respect to the dashboard is as follows. We have an objective, and so we need performance indicators to see whether we're meeting our objectives. We were told, Mr. Chair, that when witnesses come back and testify in person, that would reduce injuries for our interpreters. And if they're testifying remotely, well, that's another issue. I'm curious. You don't have a graph in your dashboard about this. You said that 70% of the witnesses are testifying virtually and 30% are appearing in person. Do we have any positive results about them coming back more often in person? Yes, we just have checked this out yesterday. And in October and in early November, we noted that 60% of the witnesses were appearing virtually and 40% were attending in person. So there is an increase of approximately 10%. Mr. Chair, I think it would be important to have this graph in the next dashboard to see the progress achieved, because our objective was to go back to the pre-pandemic mode with 70% people of the witnesses appearing in person, 30% virtually. Now we have hybrid meetings. Mr. Chair, is it possible to add an additional graph to the dashboard? I think that's a reasonable request. Yes. So for the next meeting, we will have a dashboard with the changes that have taken place. It would be a good idea to see what's gone on. It's a good question. Thank you very much, Madame de Bellefeuille.
That was my last question on the dashboard. I will have questions on item 2B, but if anyone else wishes to address the matter of the dashboard, Chair, I will stop here and then ask my final question regarding the follow-up document at 2B. Very well. We can turn to Mr. Julian, and then back to Madame de Bellefeuille afterwards. Mr. Julian. Thank you, Chair. If I understand correctly, we are now addressing 2A, our virtual committee's dashboard, and then we will speak to 2B and 2C afterwards. I opened the floor to discuss the entirety of business arising from previous meetings at 2. If you wish to jump between the different items, you're welcome to A, B, and C. It seems to me that it would be a little easier to understand if we went through each of these themes one by one. I have questions for each of them, so I will speak to 2A to begin with, the dashboard. Thank you for the information. Very helpful. If I understand correctly, we were saying that in April, 92% of witnesses passed their pretest, their sound test. And then in October, 85. I know this is an improvement compared to prior months back in April. Nevertheless, we still have 15% of our witnesses not making the pretest and having their sound levels approved. If I understand correctly, this does not include people who did the pretest right before the committee began its meeting. If I got this right, 55 people down to 17 people. Are we able to say that the success rate in the pretest is up to about 96%? Is that right? Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mr. Julian, you are correct. This is in graph number 3. Okay. That's good. My next question is about the 17 people. These are for people who are still experiencing problems. We don't know how many of those were, told by the chair or clerk that their sound was insufficient for them to testify. No, that information does not appear in the graph. It's not something that we have gathered systematically in the past, but we are changing our process and we will be gathering that information going forward. Well, Mr. MacDonald, it will be of the highest importance for our dashboard if we have any specific committee where we see that there are pretest issues, yet witnesses are allowed to testify. I think that that's when the witnesses may be able to intervene, or ourselves saying, Chair, you're allowing people to testify when they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be allowed to do so. So considering 2C, it's very important, based on the Translation Bureau's information provided to us, that we protect the health and safety of our interpreters. So, going forward with the dashboard, could we please know the results? The number of witnesses who did not pass their sound pretest but were nevertheless allowed to testify. With that information, we'll really be able to focus in on whatever problems we may have in our committees and ensure that follow-up gets us to zero tolerance for such witnesses. That's my comment, and thank you for your answers to my questions. Very well. We will now return to Madame de Bellefeuille. I would just like to remind you of the suggestion that we deal with 2C at item number 3, that we shift it under item 3. But nevertheless, 2B and 2C, the floor is open for comments. Ms. de Bellefeuille. Yes, I would like to thank you, Chair, for having provided us with the results of the study, the findings of the scientists who have been working on the sound system at the House of Commons. Now, I am not a specialist in these matters. I'm not able to judge the quality of the report, but from the conclusions, I understand, and perhaps you could confirm whether I've got this right, the House of Commons sound system has been found to respect the quality standards that are agreed to at an international level, international quality standards. Nevertheless, why is it that we continue to see incidents and accidents? I imagine that they are due to external factors, connectivity, headsets, appropriate microphones, and so on. But perhaps, Mr. Aubé, now that we know that our sound system is good, what's the follow-up? How do we intend to ensure that we continue to reduce the number of work-related accidents that our interpreters are affected by? Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed. We have carried out sound tests with scientists working with the Translation Bureau, and this has confirmed that the system does meet ISO standards as per sound quality and all the other requirements of that standard. We have also confirmed that the issues that had been priorly identified related to the hybrid mode have also been solved. I cannot comment on the injuries, but we do know that the system is up to scratch. You are correct, Ms. Bellefeuille, in saying that what was also found and is reported is that in hybrid mode there's still work to be done, and that hybrid mode is indeed the principal source of all sound problems. The issues are connectivity, adequate equipment, and the working condition of the equipment. That counts a good deal as well. These are very important elements that all contribute to sound quality. And if we don't have good quality from a distance, then we can't really deal with it at the sound system level in the House of Commons. Yes, but how are we going to ensure that each and every meeting room, well, how can we improve the matter? What more can we do to ensure that all winning conditions are on our side every single time that we start a committee meeting? How will we continue to reduce the number of injuries? Have we done everything we can, or is there something more for us to do? And where should those efforts be applied? Thank you once again for the question. Our efforts are ongoing. We have an ongoing improvement strategy, and we evaluate the incidents, and we take each improvement and work from it, building on it. There's a lot of work being done in this regard. For one. Second, the processes, for example, we check the processes as we go along and try to push them forward. The equipment, for example, the headset, the email that was sent out by the chair refers to standard headsets for distance interpreting. This will improve sound quality. Moreover, when we work in person, we're able to better control all the variants of the sound quality. And this is the sort of thing we're now trying to make sure we can also do for hybrid participants, for the headset, the pre-tests, and so on and so forth. Mr. Julian, do you have any other questions? Your hand seems to be up. Perhaps it was up from before. Or do you have another question? Yes, go ahead. Thank you very much. So sorry, Mr. Chair. The sun is rising on the mountains here in British Columbia, and I can see that I have the sun right in my face right now. It's a lovely day over here in New Westminster. Regarding the tests, I can see that at the beginning of the information provided, we're told that the tests and the results are owned by the House of Commons and they should not be shared without permission. Of course, we needed to share the results with the union representing our interpreters. So has that information been shared with the union so that the interpreters union also has access to the results? Mr. Eldidi. Thank you, Mr. Julian, and thank you, Chair. Yes, we are waiting for the consensus of the specialists, the scientists, and we have the consensus in their letter. So now we have no problem sharing the document publicly. But it hasn't yet been sent to the union, not yet, but that it will be made public to all, including the union. All right. But I do encourage you to send it directly. I mean, making it public is one thing, but telling the union, look, we're sharing this information with you, is another thing entirely. So I strongly encourage you to send it to the union so that they will be made fully aware of the results of the study. Thank you. Very well. Any further questions on this topic? I think that we've covered 2B now, so we can move to 3.
Services. Now, we've moved 2C over to that as well. And, okay, and we'll start with Michel Patrice, who will give us a short presentation. Monsieur Patrice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. At our last meeting, I undertook to meet the Deputy Minister of the department in charge of the Translation Bureau, and I did meet them last week. So I'm here to update you on that meeting. At the outset, I brought up the matter that we're still waiting for an answer by the Translation Office following the 27th of September meeting. We were waiting for it when I met the Deputy Minister. We have received the answer now. We received it yesterday, and I understand that it has been circulated to all members. Another topic at that meeting, I said that we hoped to see some movement on the distance interpreting project at the Translation Bureau.
All to those who were the freelancers who were interested in doing remote interpretation to provide their availability for the January to June period. So there's been some movement on this front. L'autre question qui a été soulevée.
Another issue that was brought up was the matter of the correction of the exams which took place at the beginning of November.
Been marked, and that my understanding is that everyone who has qualified or has successfully was successful in the exam will be offered either employment or a freelance status. The onboarding time with respect to those particular individual depends on the circumstances, but we can assume that there's going to be a new person that's going to be able to embark with the Bureau. At this time, I'm going to say it's too early to conclude that those advancements would provide for an increased capacity for the January or for the return of the House after the new year. But at least it's my hope that on the short term it would stabilize at least the 57th event schedule, avoiding potential cancellation. So that's my update. I'm to connect again this week with the Deputy Minister, and we'll continue to update the board as new information becomes available. Thank you. Merci.
Are there any questions and comments? We'll start with Mr. Julian.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I find this information of the highest importance, including the 57 injuries that have taken place over the last few years. We need to keep that in mind. We've spoken of technical matters, and now we need to speak of the workload. And thank you for this update. We had 70 interpreters who took the exam on the 4th of November. 70 potential parliamentary interpreters. You've just told us that 35 of these 70 have now had their exam checked and marked. When it comes to onboarding, it seems to me that this might represent a good number of people who could be onboarded. I understand that they won't be available in the immediate for the next 2 weeks, but onboarding between the 1st of December and the 1st of February might be possible and should be carried out. How many of the 35 who have succeeded at the exam, passed the exam, how many of them will be available to work on the 1st of February? Thank you. Mr. Patrice, the answer, please. At this point, Chair, I don't yet have the answer as to how many people of the 35 have fully succeeded, but I will get the information. And also we'll get information about how long it will take to onboard them, the transition time, for those who will have accepted to work with us, either as full employees or as freelancers.
During the transition period, we need to deal with the security accreditation of these individuals, and we're prepared to help the TB with this process. Madame de Bellefeuille, followed by Ms. Finley. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for trying on more than one occasion to have an answer to our question, a question that was asked quite some time ago. I find the delay quite unacceptable. It's unacceptable that the Translation Bureau hesitates to answer our questions because interpretation is at the very heart of our institution to guarantee the use of both official languages. So, and I'm saying this publicly, I'm saying that this is unacceptable publicly because the Translation Bureau has a role to play, and its services are at the heart of Parliament, and they must do so with diligence. I have noted that the letter sent to you is not dated, and I'm wondering, in all sincerity, is this a practice of the Translation Bureau? When there's a delay in responding to a letter, they don't date their reply. So this letter really raises a lot of other questions. I would have liked to have had Ms. Laliberté appear before us because I'd like to ask her some questions directly. When Mr. Ball appeared, we were flooded with all kinds of figures about new hirings, and we didn't really understand what the TB's capacity actually was. We saw that there was a lot of enthusiasm, but we see today that this enthusiasm was not really justified, because what I do understand from this letter is that there have been 7 hirings. These people have been accredited and are working in our House of Commons committees. So we're not talking about additional resources here. We're simply maintaining the commitment of 55 spots. Am I understanding this correctly, Mr. Patrice? Yes, that's the way I understand it too. The letter also states that there are new employees and there are new independent interpreters that have been hired. So these newly accredited independent interpreters, are these people who are waiting to have their exam corrected? Who are we talking about exactly, and how many people are we talking about when we say that? Note that the new employees and the newly accredited interpreters are already included. So 7 new employees and X number of freelancers who are accredited. We don't have an exact number here. I'm still looking for this magic number, Mr. Speaker. How many interpreters do we need to have working in a given week when parliamentary committees sit, or when the House is sitting, or when there are informal committee meetings that are organized to receive foreign delegations? I've been trying to get my hand on this figure, and I'm trying to understand from this letter that the new CEO of the Translation Bureau has written to us, but where's the number? Do we have this number, Mr. Patrice? Go ahead, Mr. Patrice. I can't tell you with any great certainty what this number is. Perhaps we should ask Ms. La Liberté to appear here before the Board of Internal Economy. Perhaps we could ask her to appear before the next meeting. So my observation is that this is not clear, and this is a chair's observation. I share your observation. I would like to have an opportunity to meet with her. She's new to her position. So if everyone is in agreement, we will invite her to come.
And hopefully we'll have some clarification of what's happening with interpretation.
Ma dernière question,
Oui,
c'est,
Madame de Bellefeuille, allez-y.
Monsieur le Président,
My final question, Mr. Chair. In the second paragraph, what's surprised me, it says, if the House decides to go ahead, we're prepared to work with its implementation. So in the letter that we received yesterday, it's as if the TB was waiting to have an order from the House administration. I don't know if the English version gives you the same impression, but it says, if the House decides to go ahead. But we decided on this pilot project in May, and now they're asking us whether this should happen. Is the Translation Bureau administration asking us for a formal request? Because when I read this, it's as if the TB was waiting for a House decision. Mr. Patrice. That's a very good observation. And that was something I brought up with the Deputy Minister last week. I will put this in the category of miscommunication. But yes, we did make a request in September. We said that we needed to do this. So, Mr. Chair, to continue, when you get down to it, the clerk met with the deputy minister. So when you're meeting with a deputy minister, the conversation is more political. And when I read this letter, I see that there's a problem. The Bureau doesn't seem to be in sync with this request by Internal Economy, where we have asked about the capacity of the Translation Bureau and its capacity to serve the needs of Parliament here. My final question pertains to this letter. It says there are 70 interpreters who sat the exam. They are now correcting the exams. I don't know, but as of December 1st, 35 exams were already corrected. That doesn't really impress me that much. What are they doing? We're dealing with an urgent matter here. We're waiting for this to be resolved before we can go ahead with our work. How can we explain the fact that the Bureau has not accelerated the correction of this exam? As Mr. Julien pointed out, it's not because you sit an exam that you're necessarily going to be successful or that you're going to want to work as an interpreter in the committees. It's possible that these interpreters, once they pass the exam, they will want to work elsewhere. So I'm wondering if you put this question to the Translation Bureau. That is, how can we accelerate the correction process so that as of January 30th, we'll know how many new interpreters we have available to us so that we're able to make up a schedule and determine whether we can increase the number of events we can hold per week. So was this question asked? Mr. Chair, I'll let Mr. Patrice answer. Yes, this was part and parcel of my discussions with the Deputy Minister. the exam correction, well, we were told that this would be done by the time Parliament adjourns. So I'm going to have a further discussion with the Deputy Minister today or tomorrow, and I'm going to be looking for additional information in terms of hiring, how many have agreed to work for Parliament. But I recall since the last meeting, I'm getting very good cooperation with the Deputy Minister. I will now, Mr. Chair, just conclude my questions with some thoughts on the matter. You know, because there is a scarcity of interpreters, as a whip, I'm often asked by my caucus members who are sitting on parliamentary committees, I'm asked to participate in informal meetings, and the committee chairs submit requests for interpretation with the TB, and they're always told no, almost always. The chairs continue to maintain, to go ahead with these meetings, rather, without interpretation. And that is unacceptable in my view. And I can tell you that when you're a francophone at the House of Commons, I can tell you as a whip, I feel like I'm the police for the French language. I intervene every day on issues pertaining to access to French at several levels. And I have good cooperation from the House administration who remedy the situation, try to work miracles. But what I don't understand is that the first reflex is if there's no interpreter, the committee chairs or the parliamentary secretary should decide not to hold the event because they can't hold the event because of a lack of resources. And yesterday, I pointed this out to the government whip, to the House administration. We were supposed to be receiving a delegation from Mongolia. They were coming to the Agriculture Committee. And the meeting was held without interpreters. And that is unacceptable. The whole issue of resources, capacity of interpretation, for the next session, it's urgent and it's essential because there are lots of events that can't be, that we can't really participate in because they're being held in one language. And these events are accessible only in English because of a lack of interpreters. So this matter is urgent. We're talking about access here, and I can give you a lot of examples, but I would like to conclude by saying that you have my full cooperation, and I appreciate what the House administration has done. So I don't want to discourage my government whip colleague. I know that we've discussed interpretation here at the board to great length, but we're talking about access to both official languages, and there are a lot of informal events that are part and parcel of our parliamentary duties, and this is important. So when we get the new CEO of the Translation Bureau, it would be good. We'll be able to see her in person and stress the importance that we attach to this document. Thank you, Ms. Bellefeuille.
Ms. Finley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your work on this, Mr. Patrice. We continue to have resource access problems. For instance, in the Ethics Committee last night, it had to be cut short due to a lack of resources, and the majority of committee members wanted to continue, but they couldn't. And so finally the chair had to cut it because of a lack of resources. So this is an ongoing issue, obviously, and we're all concerned about it. I realize I'm a relatively new member of this board, but every meeting that I've been at, we've been seized with the interpretation issue and the resources in this regard as an issue that is hampering our ability to do all our parliamentary work. And given that, it seems to me that following from what Madame de Bellefoy has been saying, that perhaps it's time for us to ask the Public Services Minister to come and express our concern on the urgency of these issues and get some response as to the priorities that the minister is placing on this and how they're seeing it from their side. Because, you know, it seems we can't, it's difficult to keep coming back and really with the same answers. My understanding from your report, Mr. Patrice, was that you said that the number of new interpreters that have gone through the process, whose exams have been checked and who may stay on, simply stabilizes us at the 57 events, but is not increasing our capacity at all. It seems I don't have to be too much of a prophet to say that we will probably be continuing with hybrid parliament and in some form or other, and hybrid committees. We're getting more of an uptake from witnesses, and at the last meeting we talked about encouraging more witnesses to come in person because that's easier for our interpreters. But at the moment, we're still not even at 50-50. So I just think we need to elevate this discussion somewhat, perhaps, and get some direct answers from the minister. That, I don't know what my colleagues think, but that would be a suggestion I would have. Because we really, where we find ourselves is very concerned about workplace accidents, very dependent on a service that is high caliber, and the ones who help us out, as they are today, are wonderful. But we need more of them. And we've heard before that recruitment is difficult. This is a highly specialized field. On the other hand, people are coming through the process. People are testing. They are writing their exams. And we need to have some understanding of what our limits are going forward. So that would be my suggestion, as it remains very topical, very timely, and a concern to everyone who works here.
Very good. Well, thank you. And I believe, Mr. McKinnon, you had a comment?
Oui,
or
juste
question?
quelques commentaires.
Yes, a few comments. I am very pleased to take the comments of my two colleagues, Ms. de Bellefeuille. I understand that you're feeling like the French language police, and I feel somewhat the same. I can assure you that I, Mr. Leblanc, and our Francophone colleagues at the Government Caucus are also very concerned about this issue, and we are as frustrated as you are about it. And as you and Ms. Findlay have just underscored, I think it is high time that we ensure that this issue being handled by the Board of Internal Economy starts, being taken note of by all members of the committee, as it is taken to note of by you, Mr. Chair, and by the members here present. We all want to find solutions, and perhaps I can put this in the form of a question to Mr. Patrice or for our other witnesses here today. When Mr. Ball came before us, we spoke of some 30 resources, but we're certainly not there yet. Now we're speaking of 7, plus another, if I'm not mistaken. Did I see 11 new people who would be ready to participate in dispersed mode? If this approach is adopted, if we go forward with it, have I read that correctly? Yes, the letter mentions 12 accredited freelance interpreters with an interest in participating in dispersed mode. Very good. And the letter also says that if the House decides to go ahead with this new way to provide services, being interpretation in dispersed mode, then we stand ready to work towards its implementation. Yes, a dozen accredited freelance interpreters have already expressed an interest in participating in the project. So what would be the barriers to using this approach? Question to Mr. Patrice. There is no barrier. This decision was taken by the board on the 29th of September, and during my discussion with the Deputy Minister, I mentioned that we were impatiently awaiting the application and the use of this new mode. All right, so that gives us 19 more interpreters. I know that others have suggested, so let's just be clear, would this improve matters? As for the dozen able to provide interpretation in dispersed mode, we're not yet able to, nor is the Translation Bureau able to tell us yet how many of these people would provide how many hours. So we can't yet weigh the results in increased capacity of bringing on these 12 in this mode until we get information about the answers that these 12 people provide to their requests. Thus, I can't state that in January we would have increased capacity. That would be trying to profitize on my part. I imagine it's much the same for the 70 potential interpreters who have sat the exam, the accreditation exam. Of course, first they have to pass the exam, I take it. And then they have to be ready to and interested in working as parliamentary interpreters. Could you sort of give us some sort of outline of how many of those 70 might perhaps wish to work in parliamentary interpretation? And how long it would take between the point in time when they would be accredited to the point in time their services would be used on the Hill, given, of course, that they are freelancers, some of them, that their hours can't be foreseen, and so on and so forth. I cannot speculate in order not to make a mistake, but I will specifically discuss this during my next meeting with the Deputy Minister, and I will be in a position to provide more information after that. Last question. I take it that for this, let's say, ecosystem of 70 potential interpreters, we're doing everything we can to encourage them, to even bait them to want to come work here for the Parliament. I certainly hope that's the case, but you might do better to ask that question of the Translation Bureau when they will appear here. Very good. I want to be sure that I'm clear.
We're going to be inviting the Translation Bureau and Mrs. Laliberté to witness here, and we'll have questions. On the Minister, is that something we open the invitation, or do we have, what do we want to do with that one? Do we want to wait till we've spoken to Laliberté before we invite the Minister? Ms. Finley?
That's fine.
That's good?
Fine. Let's hear them first.
Okay, very good. Good. If that's fine, then we'll move on to item number 4. The Supporting Committee on Operations, Mr. MacDonald will have a short presentation for us, and then we'll open it up to questions. Mr. MacDonald.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In December 2021, at the beginning of the Parliament, we requested further resources to support committees, and the board allotted 5 new employees to support their work. And the request today is for approval of 2 of these resources on a permanent basis, a committee clerk and a committee assistant. These resources are managed in the framework in which all clerks are managed, and so far all resources that we have were fully used and even overused.
The administration staff special committees using existing resources to support standing committees. However, currently the committee's team is already fully committed supporting the activities of standing committees. In addition, as we have shared in the document before you, we have had a consistent presence of special committees over the last 4 years and an average of nearly 2 special committees per fiscal year over the past 10 years. In fact, we are currently supporting 4 special committees using the existing resources for standing committees and the 2 additional temporary resources granted by the board last year. When the board granted these resources last year, it was with an understanding that we would report on their utilization at this time and to determine if the need was ongoing and to confirm the permanent nature of these resources. As a result of the ongoing activity levels of committees in general and adding the ongoing activities and creation of special committees, we recommend this request to the board to help ensure committees continue to be adequately supported. And be pleased to answer your questions at this time.
Questions or comments? Questions ou commentaires? Il y a une recommandation. Est-ce que tout le monde est d'accord?
There is a recommendation. Do we all agree with it? Good. So let us turn to number 5. The parliamentary exchanges budget, an increase to it. We have Mr. Leblanc who will present on this topic. Marie-Ève Belzile, who will be presenting alongside him.
Request on behalf of the Speakers of the Senate and the House of Commons concerning the budget for parliamentary exchanges. Joining me this morning is Ms. Marie-Ève Belzile, the Principal Clerk for Parliamentary Exchanges and Protocol. Parliamentary exchanges enhance Canada's ties with other countries and facilitate the sharing of ideas, knowledge, experience, and Canadian values. Such activities include visits abroad by the speakers, generally accompanied by a delegation of members or senators, as well as visits to Canada by foreign speakers. The envelope for parliamentary exchanges also supports the Parliamentary Officers Study Program, which promotes the understanding of legislative institutions by offering a professional development opportunity to officials from existing and emerging legislative institutions. During their visits abroad, the speakers will generally meet not only with their counterparts, but also with heads of state, heads of government, ministers, and other parliamentarians. They afford an opportunity for all members of the delegation to promote Canadian interests from a parliamentary perspective. Given our close cooperation with Global Affairs Canada, they also allow Canadian diplomatic missions abroad in the host countries to benefit from this prized access to senior decision makers.
With the resumption of parliamentary diplomatic activities since pandemic restrictions were lifted, we have seen a marked increase in the general costs, as well as an increase in the number of requests for diplomatic activities in Canada and abroad. The current budget will not allow us to keep up the current rhythm of parliamentary activities. The budget for activities has remained under $1 million, around $1 million for nearly 20 years. It has not been inflation adjusted or adjusted for the recent surge in prices. Chair's call for a permanent adjustment to support parliamentary diplomatic efforts, promoting democracy, sound governance, and Canadian parliamentary systems on the international stage.
Activity levels for a typical fiscal year. And based on the expenses incurred since parliamentary exchanges resumed in earnest this fall, as can be seen in the table on page 3 of the note you have before you, at current cost levels, a typical parliamentary exchanges program would far exceed the available funding, which explains today's request. Therefore, the request before you is twofold. There's a request first for an adjustment for the remainder of this fiscal year and a request for a permanent funding increase for the next fiscal and subsequent fiscal years. As with all budgets for international and interparliamentary affairs, the budget for parliamentary exchanges is shared between the Senate and the House of Commons according to the usual 30-70 ratio. And I can inform you that the temporary increase for this fiscal year was approved by the equivalent of this committee at the Senate earlier today, and the request for permanent funding is continuing through its process, their main estimates process, which is currently underway. I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions et commentaires? Questions or comments?
Questions or comments?
Mr. Scheer?
Yeah, first just a question on page 3 when you have the anticipated average number of activities, that would include both the Senate and the House Speaker? Okay.
That's correct.
That's it for questions. I have some comments, but I don't know if anybody else has technical questions before I get into
Any
comments.
other questions or comments? Go ahead with the comments.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll just, as someone who has been in the role that you have, Mr. Speaker, I, of course, fully appreciate the value that having parliamentary exchanges can bring to parliamentarians and to our overall knowledge here as it relates to our partnerships with other countries through a number of forums. And I note that there are lots of those types of things going on and funded under the JIC with parliamentary exchanges and all different opportunities for parliamentarians to visit with counterparts in other countries. It's just I just have a concern with the signal this would send. I mean, this is a pretty substantial increase in terms of percentages, and you know, at a time, especially if we think to some of the messaging in the Minister of Finance's speech about the things that are to come and the difficulty many Canadians are facing, without in any way trying to diminish the value of some of these types of exchanges. I don't think that I just wouldn't be able to support that level of an increase. It's I think it sends the wrong message, and you know, there can be unlimited demand. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to always meet that demand. And I think if there's a way to prioritize the goals that you may have as a speaker, or that parliamentarians may have encouraging you to strengthen ties with other parliaments, I think if we looked at it that way and came up with a bit of a ranking or prioritization, we should be able to manage the rhythm, as you said. You know, just the rhythm may have increased, but we can slow the rhythm down and live within the existing budget.
Mr. Leblanc, did you want to comment on that? No? Okay, then I believe we have Mr. Julian next. Mr. Julian.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I certainly see the value of the exchanges. I note that the uptake up until recently has been a little less than 60%. So I find the budget increase that is proposed here to be significant, and I think particularly in the climate that we're living in now, it needs to be re-examined in terms of the overall figures, in terms of prioritizing, of course, exchanges as well. I think all of this can be looked at and evaluated, but the amounts are significant, and I think at this time it's probably worthwhile looking at this issue from another standpoint and perhaps having a discussion with revised figures at another BOI meeting.
Comments or questions? Very good. I mean, this does affect me directly, and without taking signs of one or the other, but I just want to point out that 20 years without an increase, the real problem is that it hasn't been increased, and it doesn't really reflect the realities of inflation, and especially post-COVID cost in increases. So that's something that I think everyone should maybe consider. There's two parts, of course, to this: the travel which goes out, which people concentrate on, but also the reception of people coming in, which is a significant part of the cost of going. I guess my question to the board is just what level of diplomacy do they want? And when I do get people requesting to come and visit with the speaker, and I refuse them, shall I say that the board is no longer interested? That's just a question I'll throw out there for you. Something to think about, and whatever the board decides, I'm willing to go along with. So it really is it is what is out there. So the Parliamentary Studies Program is something else that's included in there, where we have MPs going abroad and coming back. So it is quite substantial, and it's something to consider when looking at the costs of doing business as a government. That's the only comments I'll make there. I don't think there's any much more to say. Other than we've gone about 3/4 way through the year, and the coffers are now empty. There's no more left. I think there's $3,000 left. So it will go from there. And we'll go to Ms. Sahota. I'll let her continue.
I think one thing I just wanted to add to the conversation is that although it may send the wrong signal or look bad, we are all spending, even as members of Parliament, more on flights, more on the cost of food that's in committees here, and all of those costs are going up for these parliamentary, like diplomatic trips. And so that's something that's taken into consideration, and that should be taken into account. If the budget hasn't gone up in 20 years, you can imagine in 20 years there's a huge difference in costs, even if it is the same amount of trips, or you're not dramatically increasing the amount of diplomacy work that you're doing. It's important work, and we have to recognize that that is the reality due to the increase of cost today. So what do we do? Do we no longer, like the speaker is saying, no longer have those opportunities? I mean, that's something for the committee to consider and all the members to have an opinion on, but I think we should take that into account.
Very good. Mr. Scheer.
Very legitimate points. Obviously, over the course of many years, inflation eats away a lot more in the last few years. However, I think Mr. Julian's point is very significant as it relates to that. When we look at the budget utilization rate being where it's at, that would tell me that there should be some room within that budget. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the JIC itself usually lapses some money. It might be hard to say over the last few years because of the pandemic, but I think my recollection serves me that that's normally the case. So, perhaps that's something that could be considered if there are other envelopes that are lapsing dollars, including the current budget that we're looking at. Maybe waiting a year or so and seeing how that shakes out, how many of these activities the speaker can accomplish. But it seems to me that just looking at a lapse rate of 40% would indicate that previous chair occupants in both chambers have been able to carry out their functions and welcome those who are visiting while still not using the full budget. So that would be my comments.
Mr. LeBlanc, did you want to comment on that?
Two comments that I would make in relation to that. It is true the utilization rate in previous years average is lower. I would say the cost increase over the last several years has been much more substantial than in previous times. And as the speaker has pointed out, in this year alone, the entire envelope has been committed in 9 months of the fiscal year. So that's an indication of how dramatically the costs have increased associated with this. The second point I would make around the JIC envelope is that the requests that we receive from associations each year far exceed the amount that's available in the JIC envelope. And as a result, most associations get far less than they request, and as a result are forced to reduce their activity levels, either by reducing the size of delegations or not undertaking certain activities. So it is true that they end up lapsing funds, but they end up lapsing funds in part because they reduce their activity levels. And so if they're allocated $100,000, they might spend 80. Had they been allocated $150,000, they might spend 140. So in working within the limited funds that are available at the JIC, they it's true, do end up on occasion lapsing funds. I think the utilization rate is somewhere around 75 or 80% for parliamentary associations. But the requests that are received each year from associations generally far exceed that.
Ms. Finlay.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that we put this over to the next meeting and perhaps a revised suggestion come forward when we're hearing that at 3/4 of the way through the year that funds have run dry. That in itself and simple math would suggest perhaps some increase but not a doubling of the amount. I take Ms. Sahoda's comments. I understand. We all understand that costs have increased over this period of time and even over the last year with inflation being what it is. But I think the request is something I can't support at this level, but would be willing to look at a revised request.
Consensus then? Very good. We'll put it off to the next meeting. Okay, very good. Now we'll move on to the item number 6, quarterly financial report for the second quarter of 2022-2023. Monsieur Saint-Georges, accompanied by Sylvie Lafontaine, will be making a report.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I'm presenting the quarterly financial report for the second quarter 2022-2023. This report, which is not audited, was prepared using the expenditure basis of accounting system and prepared by the administration. I can attest to the accuracy and the reliability of the information therein. Slide 2, please. Let's remember that the 2022-2023 annual budget approved by the board was for $581.4 million, representing an increase of 3.6%, namely $20 million over the previous exercise. It should be noted that on September 30th, 2022, the House conducted its activities within the limits of its authorizations. Next slide, please. As of September 30th, 2022, the House had spent $259.9 million. This amount represents a $15.3 million increase over the previous exercise.
The increase is mainly from 4 items. The first represents $8.7 million for travel and members and House officers' salaries. This amount is mostly due to an increase in travel costs following the easing of public health restrictions. Another significant driver of the overall increase is in item number 2, $4.2 million, mainly pertaining to lower salary expenses as newly elected members transitioned into their roles and progressively hired their employees following the election last year. The third item is an increase of $1.1 million spent on travel by committees, associations, and exchanges, again following the easing of public health restrictions. And the fourth item represents another $1.1 million increase to employee benefit plans, mainly due to higher salary expenditures. Mr. Speaker, there are no other financial material variances or concerns to bring to your attention, and this concludes my presentation, and welcome any questions you may have.
Are there any questions or comments? Questions, commentaires?
Questions or comments?
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Saint-Georges and Madame Lafontaine, for your presentation. Numéro 7, projet pilote de...
Number 7, professional development pilot project for employees of members, House officers, and National Caucus Research offices. We will ask Ms. Laframboise to speak to this issue, to present her report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My submission pertains to the professional development pilot project for employees of members, House officers, and National Caucus Research offices. In June 2021, the Board approved a one-year pilot project for the professional development of members' employees. As part of this project, each member could use up to $5,000 from the Central Fund for the development of their employee skills and competencies in support of their parliamentary functions. On June 16, 2022, the Board extended the period of the pilot project until March 31, 2023, so that members could use the balance of the $5,000 allocated in June 21. Up until now, 39 employees have used this pilot project for expenditures totaling $17,000. We'll begin with Mr. Julien, followed by Madame de Bellefeuille. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Laframboise.
Very important component. So my impression is this pilot project has been a success. It means better service for the public. It means more skills for our staff. It does have a positive impact, as Madame Laframboise has indicated so clearly in terms of staff retention. And that as well has real impacts for our constituents. So I certainly support the proposal and the recommendation. I think this is something that has provided a better quality of service to our constituents, which is what we're all about.
Madame Laframboise, any response to that? No? Madame de Bellefeuille.
Ms. de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Chair. Let me congratulate you for this pilot project. I'm not sure if we all remember, Chair, but this was an idea that was put forward by the whip, the Liberal whip of the time, at the time, Mr. Holland, who had suggested that we allocate this amount for training of riding personnel, and I think it was a very good idea, very well thought, because we, as Mr. Julien did, saw that the personnel's work has changed over time quite a good deal, the nature of the work, and the profile of our needs has changed as well. So we have found that it's important to develop the knowledge base and the capacities of our employee working for members and our House officers as well. I would like to congratulate the team. Often when a pilot project is run, it's complicated, but the reporting, the requests for payment and so on, everything went along very nicely. It was easy and we were well assisted. I would say this knowing that often a pilot project, you can't really see what the uptake will be, how much work will be involved. But I can tell you that for the Bloc Québécois, 80% of our members took advantage of this pilot project budget. We encouraged them to do so, and they were much encouraged in this effort. And the feedback I get is that your team is really excellent, highly competent, and you're made it easy for them to work with administration and finance. So when you participate in a project without too much red tape, few barriers, it's really much easier to make good use of it. So once again, Mr. Chair, I'm taking advantage of my speaking time to congratulate the team on the success of this pilot project. Thank you, Madam. Are there any other questions? Mr. Julian.
The question, just a comment. Congratulations to Madame Laframboise. I'm completely in agreement with Madame de Bellefeuille that the process has been very clear and easy to go through for my staff that have accessed professional development. And I neglected to give credit to Mr. Holland, and I should. He was the person that originally started raising this, and we don't often give credit where credit is due to members of other parties, but I think Mr. Holland was a visionary, and so congratulations to the House administration and to everyone involved. I think this has been an unqualified success.
Thank you, Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Peter. That's very kind. I just want to thank Madame Laframboise and everybody for the success of the program. I'm very, very happy that it's worked out and it's serving folks well.
Very good. I take it we have consensus on this. Okay. We'll now go, I will say that's passed in going on. Now we'll go to in camera. So what we're going to do is take about 3 minutes so that we can technically move everything over, and we'll be right back à huis clos. Merci beaucoup.
Back in camera. Thank you.